we all have to be careful with how we talk about these things, because some people will say, it reminds me of the college county, don't lower the barrier, right? When the government was talking about
Yeah.
take away 4-year college, are we lowering the barrier? No, we're not lowering the barrier, right? We
Yes.
are adequately creating solutions that train people for the job, the in-demand jobs at hand. And I think
Yeah.
that's also something, Linda, big picture, that um, to spread out and talk about work conversations that we are going to have to see women adjust a little bit more too, especially because not the future of work in this way, but
Yeah.
some of the work that the pendulum seems to be swinging back towards what people called trades or technical roles or things that were
Yeah.
predominantly, male fields. And we were like the
Mhm.
fringe where people were like, be a woman in the trade, or like,
Yes.
but how do we become larger participants in where the
Yeah.
opportunities are?
Welcome to the new chapter of the Her Resources podcast. I'm your host, Linda Misegadis, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this next season with you solo. This podcast has always been about amplifying women's voices, exploring the challenges we face in HR, leadership, and life, and sharing the tools and inspiration we need to thrive. And now, I'm taking that mission even deeper. You'll hear real conversations with bold and authentic women, as well as reflections from me on everything from pay equity and burnout to confidence, leadership, and the messy, beautiful journey of growth. This is more than just a podcast, it's a community, a space for us to learn, lead, and lift each other up. Welcome to this new beginning. This is the Her Resources podcast. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the Her Resources podcast, where we have honest conversations about leadership, growth, and the systems that shape women's lives and careers. When we hear the phrase the future of work, we often think about AI, flexibility, hybrid schedules, or skills transformation. But here's the real question. Who is the future actually being designed for? Because the future of work isn't just about technology or talent pipelines. It's about policy, it's about funding, it's about compliance structures, it's about incentives and capacity, and those systems determine who advances and who gets left behind. Today's guest, Lawrese Brown, brings a powerful cross-section lens to this conversation. She is a workforce strategist, a trusted advisor to system leaders across education, workforce development, and state government. What makes her perspective so critical is her ability to bridge research and implementation, translating evidence into policy positions, coalition-ready agendas, and real-world change. In today's episode, we're exploring what the future of work looks like when viewed through the lived experience of women and how system design, not just individual ambition, shapes opportunity. Lawrese, welcome to the studio. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Linda. I'm excited to be
Yes.
here.
Well, I always love seeing you because you are just the most brilliant person. You always bring such an amazing perspective. And I love just the, you just bring it from so many different ways of looking at it and all this data, but how do you then translate all of that data? So I want to jump in first by asking you, when you hear the future of work, what do you think we're getting right and what do you think we're missing?
I do think this is a broader conversation, but we are getting right the importance of emergent technology, usually described as AI's, impact on the labor market. And when I say the labor market, I mean what jobs are available, what skills we need for those jobs, and increasingly, how do we skill people who are already skilled in certain professions that are going away for the jobs that will exist, and how do we get new people in those jobs? So I do think that's not a panic button that people are hitting prematurely. I think we are seeing, we are correct in that you can't have the future of work if people can't get into work and don't understand what the work they'll be asked to do at work. But the other part of this question, which is overlooked, is the economic landscape that has influenced not even what types of work we have access to, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost in some ways like personal versus professional. is at this point that almost feels non-resolute for Gen Z, right? That's why they're like, we're
Right.
sorting
Right.
it out. We're not going to do it. I don't think that's talked about enough. I don't think we've talked about the policies that this generation, younger generations have seen not work. And,
Yeah.
from an education background, you talked about talent pipelines. I think it's certainly beyond the, okay, college is not the only path. It's even beyond that, it's affordability, right? Before college, and college is a great segue into the broader conversation because even before it was like everyone doesn't need to go to college, it was like, this tuition is going up higher than the rate of inflation every year, right? Like the cost of
Right.
college isn't affordable. But when you look at that in schools, an education is a helpful lens for everyone to look at because we go through it. But you consider um, the caretaking aspect, whether
Mhm.
especially as we focus on women who have children, but you also consider where are majority of children getting their support from in terms of policies like um, Medicaid, right? Where 4 out of 10 births
Right.
are insured through Medicaid, so it's not even meant to be a children's policy, but it is one that deeply
Mhm.
affects children. When you talk about food affordability, again, all of this under the nature of just thinking about education, but big picture, what you're talking about is what we are getting right is there are like they say, some doors you can walk into and then walk kind of out of. The internet was like that. Everybody was like, "This is going to change things." We walked into the internet, and yeah, okay, we get. It wasn't this elimination of things. If anything, we saw a proliferation
Right.
of digital jobs and new modalities that were offline. I think of marketing and advertising we could put online, but AI is not showing up in that way. AI, what it has done for us is we're seeing initial elimination and no answer.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
when we're hearing layoffs, the ambiguity, people might be like, "Oh yeah, it's AI," but okay, but what aspect? Is this the part of AI where your shareholders are saying you need to invest in the automation and then so
Mhm.
I have to go? And maybe that works for larger organizations, but when you start to hear it around stable sectors like the government, will have
Yes.
permanent reduction in force. I don't think in my lifetime they're gonna go back to the way it was before, especially
No.
the conversation around waste and fraud, but even bigger picture, how many people do we need in those roles? But again, zooming out, that was considered a stable place,
So
like that
true. Yes. Yeah.
will work. But then even when we talk about um, especially women, how much we rely on in terms of retail, right? The
Yes.
hospitality and those type of sectors and how they're disrupted. Or if they're not being disrupted, if you look at the proliferation of people taking on DoorDash or Uber Eats or just other ways of bringing
Mhm.
in income using their efforts, they offer flexibility, but there's certainly lower wage opportunities. And so
Yes.
there's pieces here. Again, we're getting right. There are long-term, we walk through the door, we can't walk back implications we
Mhm.
should be talking about in terms of AI on the labor market, how we do work and how we get into work. But what's underneath that is there's a bigger economic collapse that we've been inching
Yes.
toward, but that we've overlooked, whether it's that trade-off in industries that, have flexibility versus like low wage, because we soon after the pandemic ended, it was like, okay, back to work. The bigger
Yeah.
conversation, if you're in
Yeah.
certain industries around certain politics and there's an office, get back, especially if you want to advance. Again, that
Yes.
goes back to what we know as women in terms of the private decisions that lead to promotions versus maybe actually the performance evaluations. And I'll say this because we've already touched on a lot, but I'm always careful. We don't want to just say, "Oh, women," and then tie it directly to children. But we can safely say, usually as a woman, there's some caretaker responsibility, if not directly children, but some accountability to a personal force outside of a personal relationship. Whether sometimes it's a parent, um, and again, the policies that don't necessarily support that. Whether it's
Right.
FMLA. We already talked a little bit about childcare, but we're really not equipped to have the economic conversation that comes with an accelerated conversation about how the labor market is changing. So I do think we're getting that wrong, and largely because it's siloed. Okay, we're talking about the housing market.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about the cost of cars. Okay, we're talking about childcare. Okay, we're talking
Mhm.
about, like, tariffs impact on food and retail, but we're not talking about, the American dream and affordability being a key aspect of that.
Right. No, that's so true. Well, and you bring up like so many amazing points around all of this. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are around how do like funding models and the compliance requirements and kind of the incentives that are out there quietly shape workforce outcomes, because I think that's a big part of what you're talking about there too, is that we talk about things at a surface level sometimes, but what you're talking about is really getting more in the weeds of the real impact of what's happening across the country today.
Yes. A great example of this is apprenticeships. So if we zoom out, people are talking more about apprenticeships because one, there's an expectation of day one ready. And we can look at that
Hmm.
from saying, some of the critique around college grads was, okay, you have your degree, and not just it's not real world applied learning, but even some of those, meaning it's not technical, I should say. There's not a technical expertise sometimes with some majors, but even just around comportment, how do you show up on day one? There was just this sense of like, oh, you don't know what to do here, right? How to ask questions,
Right.
how to initiate, how to problem solve. And big picture apprenticeships have emerged as, I don't want to say a safer pathway, but certainly one when you consider employers want day one ready talent. They want people who know how to hit the ground running. That tends to be a model you more trust. But it's one that has largely been with the trades and the unions. They've put that in place.
Hmm.
So why are we saying this, right? Because the big picture, the whole point of this example is where there's policy, which is about here's what we're incentivizing, here's what we want to see happen. And then there's the implementation on the ground. And we know that that's been the biggest gap, right? It's like this was great in theory, but it didn't work. And I use apprenticeships as the most recent example of that. And the idea of day one ready is great for employers, but the buy-in is not there. And that's the buy,
Right.
so okay, who's going to fund that alongside the employer? How do they access that money? This grant's available. Well, how do we get it from the Department of Labor or the Department of Ed? Okay, and getting it again, it's not like you just get reimbursed, though there are policies that are
Mm-mm.
like that. It's really about what is the
Right.
regulation and hoops you have to jump through to even show you're qualified, right? And so
Right.
that's clunky. If I'm an employer, why am I incentivized to go through that off of just the goodwill of wanting entry level talent? You know,
Right.
and so we're watching it. Whereas again, you talked about incentives. An alternative could be, well, you know what? Why don't I just repop people from this department and just put them here? And so again, I'm saying that to
Hmm.
say policy incentivizes usually through some form of grants or reimbursement. They're
Hmm.
trying to give you money to get you to do something. That sounds great. But then the question is, even outside of, well, who's the person appointed to do it? How easy is it to get that money? And is the outcome worth it? Right? And apprenticeships just aren't
Right.
like, okay, great, we did it and you're signed up, like, and you're no, you're overseeing the person, you're making sure that they have a pathway to understand the job. Apprenticeships are also well celebrated because it's a learn and earn model, but who's the partner along the way? You're
Hmm.
trying to get the right community college partner, right? Because you can earn, but where are you also doing that learning? And again, without going too much into the weeds, what you're talking about is, policies will put in place. Again,
Hmm.
medical leave act, that was another one. Like, how do we help people maintain a job if something
Hmm.
expected to support their families? Same thing came up. What employers qualify? Oh, you have to at least have
Right.
50 employers over. Well, I'm at a small business.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
but when does the money come? This is if I'm not okay, it's
Hmm.
relatively unpaid or low paid, but like I need some money while I'm
Hmm.
helping my
Right.
family member. I'm already know I'm gonna be paid less, and so you look at these things, right, and does that money start immediately, or do I have to wait for that
Right.
paperwork to go through? Are
Yeah.
businesses even over 50 employees incentivized to do that? Because they probably have
Hmm.
to pay some additional money on my behalf. Is that coming out of my paycheck? Who's paying for that? And so again,
Right.
these questions consistently come up, and what it does, Linda, and it goes to the earlier conversation about the wraparound services that go with the
Hmm.
American dream. It continuously positions us at odd with the people, with the employers who are or organizations that are support citizens in achieving the American dream, right? Like what's possible for me
Yeah.
as long as I have my work ethic and some competence, I
Mhm.
should be able to have. But when you consider that the policies that are put in place to support that are, do you qualify for them is always the first
Right.
question, especially
Yep.
according to outdated income limits, right? Do you
Yeah.
qualify
Yeah.
for them? Is your employer even going to allow you to access them? How does anybody get the understanding of how to access that money from whether the state or local governments? All
Mhm.
those things come into play, and the timeliness of it, right? I mean,
Right.
if we're not having a bigger, broader conversation about some of these more nuanced policies, even unemployment, as people have
Mhm.
talked about the increased pressure on the unemployment system, what people are paid out weekly, it doesn't cover your salary, not even close. Where did this come from? And so
Right.
again, it's those pieces that anytime you're talking about policy constantly comes up. This is what it says. Okay,
Mhm.
how do I qualify for it? Even after I qualify for it, how does that money get to me? And unfortunately, it doesn't usually get to us timely, right?
No.
Which means if you're a business, you certainly need to have some runway. But if you're a person, again, you need to have some personal runway. Usually not the case if you are in an unexpected, extreme personal circumstance, or not an extreme, unexpected
Mhm.
personal circumstance.
I have exciting news. The Her Resources podcast is opening sponsorships. If your brand supports women in HR and leadership, think talent, well being, learning, pay equity, coaching, productivity, or mission driven tech. This is your moment. Our listeners are decision makers and change makers who show up for real conversations and practical tools every week. We offer flexible options, pre-roll or mid-roll host reads, series sponsorships, and thought leadership integrations that highlight your story without the fluff. Ready to connect with a highly engaged audience and grow with us? Email contact@herresourcespodcast.com and put sponsorship in the subject line. I can't wait to collaborate. Well, and it will be curious to see because what we're seeing happen right now at the administrative level is that a lot of those things that were put in place before, or this notion that the government was in place to help support businesses and citizens of the country, that perspective is changing right now. And a lot of those programs and policies and things that either businesses or individuals might have relied on are also either changing or going away, right? And so now it creates the situation with, well, now how do we do these types of programs if there is no way for us to receive some type of grant or funding to help support in those situations as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Linda, what you spoke about so well in such sincere terms is it. The businesses, we often think of the government as here for the citizens, and yes, but and sometimes more nefarious ways. We're like the government is for the businesses,
Right.
the ones that get the taxes. Like, businesses need governments to regulate things as well, and they need government
Yeah.
to be timely and accountable to them as well. And we're often exposed, as we joked about, to the more nefarious side of it when you see the tech
Mhm.
billionaires, you know, uh, you
Yes.
know, showing up to dinners, and you're like, okay, and then the
Right.
networks going up.
Yes.
But there is something to be said for like, and you know this well in your work, understanding what the government has in mind, what direction is the government moving in, because the government also provides guardrails for businesses and protection.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
that's so on their end, their businesses are looking at that because that's how they sustain, right? They don't need any existential crisis where the government
Right.
suddenly is like, yeah, I think a great example of this is AI, but not. I'm not saying in America. I think who was it? I think China stopped selling the videos chips or something. I'm only mentioning that
Yeah,
because
this is yeah.
it's like if a government one day turns policy that's against your very core business model, like you,
Yes.
you can't pay anybody, you can't function. And so again, noting
No.
that to say to that sentiment, right, about like
Yeah.
businesses need a a good government, and by that I mean they need an awareness of policies, and this is what the public policy and other public affairs departments are for. It's to
Right.
understand what are these policies, what's coming down the pipeline,
Mhm.
how will we need to adjust, so that, businesses can stay and be compliant. Exactly. So there are
Yeah.
compliance aspects that people look over with businesses as well that they need to maintain. And so again, we are at this time where I think that what we're asking for is almost like government needs I don't know if it's a bigger role now, but we certainly have a reliance, I would
Yeah,
say.
maybe a different role. So
Yeah.
I think kind of to your point, like way back in the day when it was, we were kind of there to give a hand up, not a
Mm,
hand out, and the programs were put in place to help. A lot of it came off of the Great Depression too, right? As
mhm.
we were rebuilding the country and policies were put in place. There are lots of reasons why different things happened at different times, but I think you're right that right now we're at a critical path that says we need to have some idea because otherwise, who is the future of work being defined for? Is
Right.
it just about the corporation and the idea that the technology is just literally going to take over? I mean, I don't think we're quite there for the days of Star Wars or Star Trek, where we can all not have money and it all just, however, it all transacts in pretend sci fi
Yeah.
world. And so it's like we're living in the reality of a situation where we don't know what's coming, which I think is even different to your point when the internet came out. Much different, even when when the whole .com boom happened, much different. What's happening today feels slightly out of control because
Mhm.
it doesn't feel like we have the guardrails in place to maybe make sure that what is the level of compliance and how are we looking out for both businesses but also for individuals who are a little uncertain as to what the future looks like.
Yeah. So well said. Yes. We're asking government to be different and distinct. And they've, like you said, we've seen them. As you were talking, I said, this reminds me of the conversation around universal basic income that people expect
Mhm.
will take off. And people, I think at one point people heard that, and America, like you said, a hand up, not a handout, and we were like,
Yep.
no, we're
Yep.
unequivocally, absolutely not.
Yep.
And now it's like there's one sector that's really leading all job growth, healthcare,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so where are the jobs if not there?
Yeah.
Um, the housing market, okay, even when you consider, and I think when people hear this, especially they talk about it, there's a generational aspect to it where like
Mhm.
being the child of boomers, and we're not even talking about the like VHA loans or even the first time home. We're just talking about trying to get a generation to get not even the job so that they could get
Mhm.
to a house, but who probably don't even understand the maintenance that goes into house. I'm not talking about the home repairs. I'm talking
Yes,
about
yes,
like
yes, yes.
the
Yeah.
the there's taxes and fees that go along
Yes,
with
yeah.
that, right? But again, that being this significant piece of the American dream is how this is how most people are going to get some form of wealth, right? Some equity
Yes.
in
Yep.
in something. Again, talking about this, I was supposed to have access to like the American dream, like the good job, at least
Yeah.
that got me forward. And then now being like, oh, that good job, I don't, maybe for them, but not for me, right? Increasingly, like
Yeah.
somebody's getting it, but increasingly more people are feeling like I can't have access to that. And that's really, I
It's
think, what
true.
we're pinpointing now. All of these things that once were easier accessed, certainly
Mhm.
at a lower cost. Now to access them, if you can get them, for some people, the cost is exorbitant. You
Mhm.
consider most people, you need a car, especially if,
Right.
the cost of it. We're not even talking about, credit and financing and things like that.
No.
Then
Yeah.
another, and again, I think the best way to frame even a house, a car, or anything we finance in support of
Yeah.
the American dream is bigger picture. Like these loans are getting longer and longer. So
Yes.
like 30-year mortgage. One time, I think the administration was talking about a longer one.
A 50-year. Yes, a 50-year more. Yes.
The,
Yeah.
the car loans are getting like
Yes.
these are not
You
3 or
can
4.
do
These
like
are
a 10-year
5.
car loan now.
So
Yes.
so
Yeah.
and underneath that is an implied sense of stability, that job security that we actually have
Yeah.
less
Yes.
than ever.
Yes.
So
Yeah. It is so true. It's like we're in a very confused state of mind right now, I think, across the board. And I think that's causing a lot of the anxiety that people are suffering
Yes.
across, probably across the globe, but certainly across the country. I'm
Yes.
curious your thoughts because of the work that you've done in education as well. I mean, you and I have talked about this before that we're in such desperate need for an education overhaul. But that's another area where I think about, okay, I was even thinking about doctors. I was having a conversation the other day, and she said, somebody was telling me, there has been a shortage of people that are actually going into the medical profession. Like they're actually starting to see a decline in the number of people who are going after that. Now they have seen a slight increase in women, which I thought, well, we'll take the small win there, but a decline there. And I'm guessing that probably the primary cause behind that is the cost associated with college. And then to your point, the long term uncertainty is, will I even have the income to be able to pay back that debt? And if we need these skills, we need these things in the world today, aren't we doing a disservice to everyone if we make education unattainable or undesirable because I don't know if I can pay for it long term. I don't even know if I'll get the job to be able to pay back the college student loan debt.
There's so many great pieces in what you said because even with the growth, so big picture with healthcare growing, there's a demographic piece to that, right? We have an aging population. Usually, as we age, we need the system more than when we're young,
Yeah.
right? Where our bodies are less resilient. But all that to say, when we look at healthcare, is a great case study in understanding so many factors that are at play that we're talking about. How is work architected? What's influencing the jobs that are available? I'm going to put your point about doctors to the side and come through it in a couple ways
Yeah.
of the
Yes,
policies
please
and
do.
education,
Yeah.
and also some of where healthcare is growing. Most people, though, when you say healthcare, think doctors. I did for a
That's
long
true.
time until
Yeah,
I
that is
started to
true.
being like, oh, the I would speculate what's growing in healthcare. The roles are these roles that are often overlooked because people just don't know what they are because who is working in
So
a
true.
hospital is government.
Very true.
So they're these tech roles, right? Or there's
Yeah.
unfortunately there's these roles related to the technology associated with scans or ultrasounds or
Yeah.
things increasingly used to spot
Very
and
good
test
point.
and treat cancer. And so, or even if we're looking at it from um, now, what's happened is, I don't understand healthcare funding. I just know the chief
Nope.
insurance officer I did learn is usually the highest paid person at a hospital, probably because they know
Mhm.
where the premiums go in and out. But certain
Yeah.
roles, for example, the nursing role, which one time used to
Yeah.
be, it still is coveted, but I think somebody said they're not doing LPNs anymore.
They're not. No, I remember my mom was a CNA, and I remember when they did away with the role of the CNA, and this was a long time ago,
Mhm,
and they pushed that onto the nurses,
mm,
and as a result, the quality of care went down
mhm.
because now the nurses weren't doing the work the doctors would normally, were supposed to do. And so now it was this trickle effect because where was patient care and all of that if
Mhm.
the nurses weren't able to do what they needed to do in the elimination of some of these other support roles that were so critical?
Yes. So now, and we're talking about this is great, Linda, and this goes to what you're talking about with the shortage of doctors, people not choosing it, what makes someone choose anything, the awareness, the trade-off that happens with certain for institutions and businesses to maintain
Yeah.
themselves where they're willing to say we're gonna push this off on someone else because of lesser money
Hmm.
and overwork this people and who's supposed to deal with the brunt of it? Obviously the patient,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of the
Right.
pushback we're hearing
Yes.
now. But all those factors are a great segue into your point about people not choosing doctors. One, what was always hidden about the medical field, but is the they carried a lot of debt. Like the people who went to become doctors and more,
Yes.
right? Like the people who had to go
Yep.
to the place house after they finished undergrad, especially for an extensive amount of time, they carried a
Yeah.
significant amount of debt. And with the policy changes around which degrees are considered professionalized and the cap,
Hmm.
right? Which in some ways we could say, okay, that was that put in place as a rational measure to address the fact that student loan, at one point to promote access, you fulfilled your FAFSA. You could have got what is it called? One is they're not unverified. One is what is it called, Linda? There's two types of loans.
Oh, yes, I know what you're talking
Yes,
about, and one carries a much higher interest rate
yeah,
as well. Yes,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
But
Yep.
the idea was you got it. Great. Like whether it
Yes.
was carrying the higher interest. And so is this some way to mitigate that? Yes, but does the live experience then say, well, if you want to be a doctor now, do you have the family money to go along with it? And then the question becomes, at what rate? Again, going back to family,
Yes.
can you significantly pay off that debt once you
Yeah.
get, because I think we just think, oh, a doctor, you must be making six figures.
You must be making ridiculous amounts of money. Yes,
Yes, yes.
absolutely. Hmm.
Without considering whether there's certain professions or doctors, that maybe specialized care. I don't know how much people make
Yeah.
just from being primary care
Hmm.
physicians. I don't know, when people go off to their own. Again, all this to say, we don't got to get in the weeds, but all the factors at play you just gave in that example of people not choosing
Yeah.
doctors, the cost of
Hmm.
to of schooling and training to get into
Yeah.
certain professions, the lack of
There's a
awareness.
shortage of vets right now
Yeah.
because, and I didn't realize this until I was looking into it, that vets essentially go to school for the same amount of time that doctors go, only they have actually a longer residency that they have to go through. And the cost is very similar to,
Mhm.
to go to school for that. And so now there's a shortage of vets as a result of that, because what you make being a vet does not equate to what you pay to become a vet.
That's right. And
Yeah.
and teachers. And what we're
Oh my
seeing with
goodness, that is
teachers,
always such a great example.
well,
Yes.
and what we're seeing with teachers, and then this goes to pathways to work. And again, it's almost the inverted example of what you said, where they, your mother was a CNA and they passed it off
Mhm.
to the LPNs. It's like teachers used to be again, it was professionalized. You had to have your
Yeah.
master's. My mother was a special education teacher for 30 years. Now there's such a
Yeah.
shortage, and I don't mention this of any judgment. People are like, "Oh,
No, not at all. These are
I
just statements. Yep,
exactly, I
exactly. Yeah.
mentioned to say, now there are teacher apprenticeships where they're just like, they literally, okay, you have your BA, or even so, have
Mhm.
you worked with students in some capacity before? It's
Yeah.
these almost like apprenticeship programs for teachers, right? Meaning like
That is
you're
so
in
true.
and you teach every day, and that's how you're
Yeah.
building the skill, and it's less of the academic pathway. Because again,
True.
and some people would say, well, that's deprofessionalizing it. Well, meaning like, because again, there's less academic training, it's more certainly
Right.
applied. But again, to your point, these trade-offs that are happening now in
Mhm.
this economy and for businesses and schools, in some ways they have to function as a business. You can't send students there if
Mhm.
there aren't any teachers there, and you need to, in order to get more teachers in there.
Mhm.
Now, you and I don't, again, this is where even as women, um, we all have to be careful with how we talk about these things, because some people will say, it reminds me of the college county, don't lower the barrier, right? When the government was talking about
Yeah.
take away 4-year are we lowering the barrier? No, we're not lowering the barrier, right? We
Yes.
are adequately creating solutions that train people for the in-demand jobs at hand. And I think
Yeah.
that's also something, Linda, big picture, that um, to spread out and talk about work conversations, that we are going to have to see women adjust a little bit more too, especially because not the future of work in this way, but
Yeah.
some of the work that the pendulum seems to be swinging back towards what people called trades or technical roles, or things that were
Yeah.
predominantly, male fields, and we were like the
Mhm.
fringe where people were like, be a woman in the trade, or like, and
Yes.
but how do we become larger participants in where the
Yeah.
opportunities are? Again, great,
Exactly.
great example with doctors of the trade-offs between training and cost of education, and
Mhm.
the demand for certain roles,
Yeah.
and what are policies we put in place, or even models that allow people to get to those professions, even with if the same cost, who carries that cost? How can we expect somebody to carry?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Where does that go?
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference.
Well, and I think about even like I'm all think it's wonderful to bring manufacturing back into the country. But then it got me thinking, okay, well, the problem with that is we don't have any skilled manufacturers anymore. And manufacturing is not the same as it was back in the day when you were on the line, right? Where it was more about putting the pieces together and each person was responsible for a component. Now it's all technology. Even mechanics, it's
Yes.
all computerized. And so it's a different skill set, it's a different mindset that you have to have if you're going to go into those trades. And who's going to do this work? Because we have allowed all of those skills to really kind of go away. We don't do that sort of stuff. So now how are you going to get people and who wants to do those jobs? And they're going to be different people who are going to want to do those jobs than the people who wanted to do those jobs 30, 40, 50 years
Yeah.
ago, right?
Oh, there's nothing to add to that, Linda. You articulated that each aspect of it so well. We outsourced a lot in America, especially
We
as we
did.
sort of service-based economy. And again, that was a policy
It
decision
was. Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
right time. I don't, we saw
Yeah, yeah.
things
I
built
mean, yeah, were we to
for
exactly. I'm not gonna judge on why we made those decisions when we did them. There was a
Mhm.
reason for it, and it worked at the time, so
A- and that's what's critical that keeps coming up in this conversation. How much are we willing to say that worked then? We're in an entirely
mhm.
different time. And that's
Yeah.
goes back to your earlier point, even about um that there's an uncertainty here.
Mhm.
Yes, there's change, but this is an uncertain type of change. And
Yeah.
we're asking for a different role from the government to help us understand a place that we haven't been before as we
Yeah.
shift again. And so
Exactly.
so well said, just bringing something back. We know, like they say, build it and people will come. No, they don't, right?
Yeah.
People,
No.
that doesn't work
Mm-mm.
for
No.
anything. So just saying, hey, we have these back here, like that doesn't mean people are
Yeah.
going to jump. And certainly there are, like you said, pathways people have to go to get to. But what you
Mhm.
articulated so well is what works in this time. And we
Yeah.
know, but the policies and the way they are not only written, but how people, first of all, it's an expertise even to understand how the policy is
Oh
written.
gosh, yeah.
Like how do you get access? What does this mean? That's its own expertise.
Yes.
And but I think that's that this critical juncture that we're at is we need to
Mhm.
democratize that process far more so people can be better advocates of themselves versus having to go to the expert or have
Yeah.
somebody in between. More of it, we need to understand how to access these things and how to investigate where more resources can come from during this time of
Mhm. I agree. In your work with young people, because I know you do a lot with younger individuals who are kind of trying to find their way and what direction to go. Do I go to a 4 year college? Do I go to the trade schools? What do I do? What are you hearing from them? I'm curious what how they're feeling and are they terrified? Are they excited? Like what's kind of the sentiment that you're hearing from these younger individuals?
young people who are in college are most frustrated with, as somebody said, the search is distinctly different and longer, right? You have
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
it's longer. Uh,
Yeah.
for people who are, and I break this down because everybody like, so if you're in college and you're graduating, you and maybe initially felt like 2009, but it's
Uh-huh.
it's it's still a little different from that, right? Like it's
Yes.
and it's that conversation that once was okay. Maybe I picked the wrong major and I should have picked something else more is more broad now. Like regardless of
Yeah.
major, this is a job market that you can find entry level, but do you have the work-based learning experiences that maybe contribute to that, coupled with the network to get you
Yeah.
in, even with the whole major piece, right? But it's a broader
Right.
that they're frustrated about. And I think some of that again is we gave them these expectations. We said this is
Yes.
the safe route. So for it not to
Yeah.
have this ROI or take longer to get ROI, is
Mhm.
frustrating. The other piece, though, I don't think it's hit. I have a nephew who's in eighth grade, and I think this generation, eighth grade in high school, has almost had this acceptance of I can go to college or trade school, and I might do the trades. They're a little bit
Yeah.
more like,
Yeah.
that's because it's trickled also to parents now. Because
Oh, that's
parents are the
true. That is true.
who are like, listen, one or the other, I just want to see you go to work.
Yeah,
Right?
just do something. Yes, exactly. I don't care what it is, just do something. Yes.
So the younger ones, I think, have more opened themselves up to, I don't have to go to college, and not as this, again, like, even outside the affordability, just like, if I wanna do trades, I can go do that.
Yeah.
That's an option for me. So that's what I'm hearing. I think for them, though, this is a generation that, as my nephew articulated really well, they're more aware of the help that they will need to be functioning adults. Meaning, like,
Okay.
they're more like, somebody's gonna give me a card because that card note I can't
Yeah, yes, yeah,
they're more like,
yeah,
how long can I stay at home? Can I keep this? Who's paying this phone bill? Like, they're
yeah.
more just
That is
like
so true.
this, where it was once like, oh, failure to launch, you're not getting out there.
Mhm.
They're understanding that these adult milestones, because of the cost,
Yeah,
will take longer, and I think that's where they're having an entirely different conversation than the rest of us. Is just like, all right, well, even after I get the job, like, what do you I'm coming back to
yeah.
you.
I gotta come home. No, it's true. It is. It's interesting because you're even seeing that in the way that they're building homes now.
Mhm.
Where I was just reading an article about a husband and wife who bought a house with like a mother-in-law apartment for
Mhm.
their son and daughter-in-law to move in with them so they could save enough money to
Yes.
hopefully be able to get out on their own. And I'm thinking about like, how is that impacting each of the generations? So the generations at the end of their career, and how is that, kind of trickling down? Because it was never supposed to be that your children were going to live at home with you forever and that you were going to maintain a family expense forever. It was kind of
Mhm.
this idea, you'd get out, you'd get started. And so what financial burden is now being added to each generation
Mhm.
in the environment that we're in today is it's really kind of fascinating to see what's happening.
It is, and then it becomes a people say, well, in other countries, that's common, right? It becomes this
Very, yeah, exactly.
in
Yes,
America, you hyper
yes.
individualistic people, you didn't need all this anyway, like somebody. It's an important lens to look through, because in
Yeah.
America, when we were given the model, uh, it was almost based on everything going right, which we know in life and
Oh
business
my
that
gosh, that is such a great
well,
point.
so much
Yes.
was going right when we were
Yeah.
sharing more, like the cost of living was moving up differently in the
Hmm.
60s and 70s, right? More people were
Yes.
participating in new ways in the economy. We were supporting people moving into homes, we
Yeah.
were allowing higher access to, like, more. And now it's like, well, everything go wrong. So, like,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
actually, this is a rational response to that doesn't work for this time. And people are
Yeah.
realizing there's an interdependency that maybe was there all along, but maybe we had more means, whether that was policies or certain infrastructure, or just we were more community
Right.
focused, that could
Hmm.
absorb some of the challenges that we face now. Um,
Yeah.
and that's I think some of what we're gonna have a larger conversation around too. You're right, Linda. To what is the dream now, right? Like, is
Right, what that is such a great point. What is the American dream? Because it
Mhm.
used to be, you'd go to school, you'd, get married, you'd get a job, you'd have the car, the 2.5 kids, the dog, whatever. It's like all of those things. That was the American dream.
Yes.
I don't think that's the American dream anymore. And if it is, I don't know who's living it. So,
No. That's right. Who's living it across the board? It is
yeah.
they expect people to be more single than ever, fewer
Yes.
children than ever. The labor market is different than we've ever seen before. So is the housing market.
Yeah.
Businesses, right? They're trying to it's almost like we're more entrepreneurial, which is small business, when America was notoriously big
Hmm.
business for a long time. And so
Yeah.
it's even while we're moving away from individualism as like, you get a house, that is such an individual question to answer today, meaning like,
Right.
what is because again, the factors that are going to influence, do you have someone who can give you a hand up, or,
Right.
even the core, like, we already know your geography, your zip code defines a lot.
Mhm.
That
Oh, yeah.
that's still gonna be a starting factor, right? Do you have access to quality education? Where education is even headed is question mark across the board. Can we get it
Yeah.
more closely tied to education? And then even if so, we're still have to recognize this is where we expect some of that social emotional learning and development to happen. But how does that happen in a
Yeah.
traditional academic environment? And what resources or people need to put in place? Or can we even put
Yep.
that accountability on the
It's
teachers?
so true.
So
Yeah.
it's a range of factors, and yeah, that is
Yeah.
defined entirely by the individual now more than ever. I think that part of the collapse of the American dream was the collectivism that we all could achieve it.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that was probably one of the biggest lies, was that the American dream was achievable for everyone, and it wasn't. And it was an unrealistic expectation to put out there in the first place, because it wasn't that simple to achieve the American dream. I mean, it takes a lot of hard work and sometimes a little bit of luck, circumstances, situations, to what your zip code, your socioeconomic background, your cultural background, all of these things affected whether or not you were going to achieve that American dream or not. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
It's it's but I do think one thing we did do better back in the day is we were more like, again, I love that you said hand up and not hand out. It was almost like beat into people's heads over the past 10 to 15 years that, like, you got to get it yourself. And we would critique people and be like, we were talking about
yeah,
Nepo babies and things, but I think everyone
yeah.
has taken this collective, like, you need help. Okay.
You do.
You need help.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
okay, do we get frustrated with the nepo babies? Sure, because they end up in some
of
positions
course.
maybe without, but are
Yes.
we recognizing that, like, actually to achieve any milestone, whether it's to
Hmm.
when you look at the data, it's a reason first generation college students struggle more than everybody else. They're the first, their parents haven't seen it, can't really
Right.
help them
Yep.
navigate it. There's a reason we do help first time home owners, and there's that
Yes.
loan that's not the conventional one. Like, you need help. You're
Right.
probably trying to navigate this a little differently than some.
Mhm.
So this idea, we know people need help, and I do
Yep.
hope there's a community aspect that reemerges,
That's
um,
what I hope too.
at this time, because this
Yeah.
we tried it, y'all. We tried to do it by ourselves. It
That's
didn't
right.
work.
That's right. We did, and it didn't work.
Hey everyone, we're the Her Resources podcast, where women share real stories, real lessons, and the resources that help them succeed. We're always looking for inspiring women, business leaders, creatives, educators, and changemakers who want to share their journey and empower others. If that sounds like you, we'd love to hear your story. Reach out to us at contact@herresourcespodcast.com and let's start the conversation.
And so it is going to be, I love that you said that because it is going to be really fascinating to watch and see. I tell people all the time that I'm glad I'm at the latter end of my career, instead of like at the beginning or even in the middle side of it, because I'm going to be curious to see what it all looks like in 10 years from now, 15, because it's going to look drastically different than when I was like in my 20s and thinking about what it was going to look like in my 30s or 40s or 50s. It's so different. But we're in this weird evolution of change that is a different kind of change than anything we've experienced, at least in a very long time. And I don't think we know how we're gonna come out the other side of that yet.
No,
So,
no, and we need policy. Policy
we
that's
need
fair
policy.
and that
Yes.
counts how people's lived experience truly is. That's where resources are directed. So I think this conversation was an important one that highlighted both the importance of the help just distinguish for people. When people say the system is rigged or the system
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
I think when people hear that, people are like, well, what do you mean? One of the great things I learned, have you ever seen that J-Lo movie Enough? Have you ever seen it?
Yes, 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 yeah, yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, the plot is like J-Lo is in this relationship with this toxic man who physically abuses her. And she goes to a lawyer and she's like, I have a court case coming up. And he's like, well, are you able to get a restraining order? And she's
Mhm.
like, what's that, a piece of paper that I throw at him when he comes? And I always laugh at that because policy in a lot of ways and our rights in
Yeah.
general are like that. Like, you
Mhm.
have this document that says you should get this, but then the gap is
Yes.
like, how is it enforced? How is it implemented?
Well, and that's the problem with everything, right?
Yeah,
It's like we talk about from immigration, and that's another great one. It's like if it was that easy to solve the problem, it would have been solved a long time ago.
that's
But
right.
the problem with that is that we're never really looking at what the core issue is.
Yeah.
And so we're not really solving the problem. We might slap a policy out there, but then to your point, how do we enforce the policy? How do we ensure the policy is enacted fairly and
Mhm.
equitably? And so we don't have the systems in place then to help support the policy. Hence the whole concept of government, which is why it's always so fascinating to me when there's this conversation like that we need to do away with government. I think it's because people don't actually understand the role of government and the role that government is supposed to play in all of this, which was to provide the guardrails, the policy, the systems to help support. Now, has it gone astray in many ways? Sure. And there are lots of things that need to improve, just like any system or any environment. But at its core, to the idea to think that you could just do away with it and we would be better, I think is a silly idea that we need that. We desperately need to have those policies and systems in place to establish those guardrails.
Yes, yes. And Linda, when I hear you talk, there's overreach, but then there's oversight, right? There's some things people are like, we
Yes,
don't want the
yes.
government in our business. Fine, that I
Yeah,
understand. But there's
yeah,
times where actually the government is accountable for oversight. You put this policy in
yes,
place, and we see this when people are like, where did this money go missing at? Somebody's job was oversight, and somebody figured out a way to
yes.
either eliminate oversight or whatever they were
Uh-huh.
sharing as evidence of oversight
Yes,
was not adequate, right? But somebody, and I
exactly.
think that's what it is we are asking for the oversight to make sure these policies are in compliance with expectations and the enforcement, right? The implementation of how do we take it from
Yes.
documents to say, okay, these are the intermediaries that are designed to bring it to us. And the challenge, this is what I'll note because I know we're wrapping up, but some of it is the federal going to state seems like they need their own, like, because federal, state,
Mhm.
local use, at least, or less in theory, is this smooth chain.
Yes,
And
yes.
there's discrepancies there too, right? I
There
appreciate
is.
that every state has its own sauce, vibe,
Yeah,
cost
yeah.
of living, but like, where can these things be made more uniform? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. There's pros and cons to the autonomy that exists, and honestly, that's a lot of times why federal oversight ended up coming in is because of that level of autonomy that they had and some of the behaviors that were occurring or the impacts that it was having to those citizens. Well, then federal oversight had to come in. So now you needed the feds to have oversight over the states. The states have oversight over the cities and counties. It is an interesting dynamic, and I do agree with you. If there was a way to kind of more normalize or standardize some of those components, would be that might be an ideal situation. I don't know how we get there, but it certainly I think could help a lot of these situations that we're dealing with today. So for sure.
yeah.
Well, I want to ask you, like, just kind of reflecting back, what do you think is one skill? I was going to ask you what one skill women should prioritize, but I'm going to ask you what one skill people should prioritize over the next 5 years.
Advocate, and that's even too sometimes jargony or loaded. Um, be your own best representative. It taking initiative, which is demonstrated by a comfort with not only a willingness to ask questions of institutions, but ask about what could benefit you and investigate it. That's what I mean. So not just
Yeah.
ask the questions, but be willing to. It's a time where you know um, there are opportunities or resources available, and still,
Hmm.
what we know about the government is if you call one time, you could get somebody. No, that's not. You call somebody else, get a different answer. That don't make it right. It makes it
Nope,
a
nope.
reality. That means ask questions. There are good people
Yes.
who want to help you investigate, learn
Yeah.
from what others are benefiting from. And, sometimes no is not an answer because the government puts a lot of restraints and qualifications on things. But sometimes
Mhm.
there are other ways you can access
Yes.
resources and support that you need. And I would say that's across the board, whether it's you're trying to figure out a FMLA policy, if you're dealing with healthcare, if you're a young person who's trying to navigate the workforce, we
Yeah.
have to be broader. We have to be better advocates or representatives of what we need, more willing to ask questions of institutions and ourselves, and
Right.
comfortable with the follow through. Yeah, somebody might be like, "Yeah, you called yesterday." Yeah, and I will call again next week because I need some help. Okay, because
Yes,
so
yes,
so
yeah.
that's the piece. The idea that that's burdensome. I don't think that's a fair thing to put on anyone who's just trying to get support in this unprecedented, like you said, in these times of uncertainty.
No. I agree. I completely agree. And I love that you said that was advocacy and also educating yourself because I do think that there was a time many, many years ago when our that people got to a place where they just followed everything blindly, right? I think that we
Mhm.
stopped checking. We stopped checking our government. We just believed that what they were telling us must be true. And we just listened to things and we assumed we're kind of falling back a little bit into that right now because of all of the social media and the quick access to information. People aren't fact checking; they're not asking questions. They're just assuming that what they read and they read it the first time that's the truth. And it's like advocate for yourself. Educate yourself. Don't make assumptions. And, I think that will help everyone in the long run and certainly helps create a much better environment for all of us to be existing in. So,
Yes. And the add on there, Linda, is as you advocate for yourself, then you can share the thing. Like change will happens best and quickest and on the localized level, right? We love that it gets up to top. Yeah, we need them to
yes.
to promote what we're saying, but it's usually because there's been some grassroots advocacy. When you learn something that benefits you and you can share it, that really is like the match that lights the other match. So as you were talking
Yeah,
and saying that, I was like, yeah. And then you can go tell your colleague, sister, friend, and they can tell somebody else. And then that's really again how people access the resources and support and opportunities that they need.
I think so too. Yeah, no, for sure. I always love talking to you. You just bring such a great perspective to things. And so it's always so enjoyable for me. And I think what I appreciate most about today's discussion is that it's just a reminder that the future of work and perhaps the future of the world is not accidental. It's designed, it's
Oh,
funded, it's incentivized, and it's implemented. So
yeah.
it's just like anything, right? If you're not willing to have a seat at the table in shaping those systems, we're going to continue to inherit the structures that weren't built for with us in mind. So I think for everyone who's listening to the episode today, whether you're in HR, education, government, or leading inside of an organization, this episode was an invitation to move beyond personal resilience and start asking bigger questions
Mm.
about system design. And Lawrese, thank you for your clarity and your insight and just the work that you're doing to bridge the research and implementation in ways that I think really matter.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Your thoughtful way. I'm not surprised. I'm like, Linda's been doing this for a while, but the way your thoughtful questions, but even the way you articulate and summarize so many key aspects of this conversation, I enjoyed it, and I have it makes me better at thinking about the problems and how to solve them. So I'm always grateful to connect with you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. If our listeners want to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way?
Oh, go to laresebrown.com. Contact me
Awesome.
there.
Yes, I love it. And to our listeners, if this conversation resonated with you, please share it with a colleague, a policymaker, or a leader who needs to hear it because shaping the future of work through the lens of all of us isn't just a theme, it's a responsibility we all carry. So thank you for being a part of the Her Resources community. And until next time, keep leading, keep questioning, and keep building the systems you want to see. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to the Her Resources podcast, where women's voices, leadership, and growth take center stage.
As your host, I'm here to remind you that the journey isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Every step you take to build confidence, create impact, or use your voice is part of a much bigger story. It's the one that inspires others to do the same. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another woman who's ready to step into her power. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. Together, we're not just changing conversations, we're changing the future.